Look at these two pictures. Picture number one is Shenzhen, China, in 2024. Skyscrapers that used to be lit up 24/7 are now dark. Factories that once produced 80% of the world's phones are shutting down assembly lines. Youth unemployment has hit record highs. An eerie silence is falling over the world's factory. Now, look at picture number two. Bac Ninh, Vietnam. Tamil Nadu, India. Roads are dusty from construction trucks running day and night. Massive factories are sprouting up like mushrooms after the rain. Thousands of workers are lining up for job interviews. Industrial land prices have doubled in just 1 year. This is not a coincidence. This is a basic law of physics. The conservation of capital. Money never just disappears. It only moves from places of high risk to places of high opportunity. While the news is obsessed with the trade war between the US and China, about chip bans, tariffs, and geopolitical tension, a magnificent truth is unfolding right before our eyes that few are noticing. The Great Migration, the largest in modern industrial history. A $1 trillion capital flight is leaving China, and it is looking for a new home. The question is, who is catching this waterfall of cash? Many think the US will win and bring jobs back. Wrong. Americans don't want to work in assembly plants for $15 an hour. Many think China will collapse. Also wrong. China is just shifting its model. The real winners in this Game of Thrones aren't the two giants fighting, but the clever third parties. The countries that are quietly standing in the middle, smiling, and picking up the diamonds falling from the pockets of the big guys. I am talking about Vietnam. I am talking about India. I am talking about Mexico. Today, we are not talking about politics. We are talking about money. We are going to follow the footprints of the eagles like Apple, Nvidia, and Foxconn. Why did they choose Vietnam to make iPads? Why did they choose India to make the iPhone 16? And most importantly, how can you, an individual investor, see the opportunity in this chaos? Welcome to the new treasure map of the world, where the monopoly of Made in China is ending, and the era of Alt-Asia is beginning. The Alt-Asia strategy. Why leave China? Before we talk about where they are going, let's understand why they have to leave. Why is Tim Cook, who spent 20 years building a perfect supply chain in China, now packing his bags? Many say, it's because of Trump and Biden's tariffs. True, but not enough. Tariffs are just the tip of the iceberg. The real drivers behind this migration are much deeper. First, the risk of stranded assets. Look at what happened in Russia in 2022. Western companies like McDonald's, Starbucks, and Renault had to abandon billions of dollars in factories and equipment overnight. CEOs in Silicon Valley saw that and shuddered. They asked themselves, if China attacks Taiwan, what happens to my $50 billion factory in Shanghai? It could be seized. It could be frozen. It could go to zero. Geopolitical risk has become financial risk, and Wall Street shareholders hate risk. They ordered, diversify immediately. We don't care how much it costs. Don't put all your eggs in the China basket. That is a survival order. Second, the aging population. Even if the US and China were best friends, companies would still have to leave. Why? Because China has run out of cheap labor. The average age of a Chinese worker is now nearly 40. They want to work in offices. They want to be coders. They want to be live stream sellers. They don't want to stand on an assembly line for 12 hours a day anymore. Wages in Shenzhen are now 3 times higher than in Bac Ninh, Vietnam. The era of the China price is demographically over. And third, the rise of domestic rivals. Apple no longer feels as welcome as before. Huawei is rising strong. Xiaomi is taking market share. The Chinese government is prioritizing domestic companies. The business environment has changed from win-win cooperation to survival competition. So, multinational corporations are forced to activate the China Plus One strategy. They need a new place. A place with young labor, a place with political stability, a place friendly to the West, but still close to the supply source. And when they looked at the world map, 2 names lit up like lighthouses in the dark. 1 is the small dragon rising in Southeast Asia. 2 is the giant elephant waking up in South Asia. Let's start with the first name. The new factory of the world, Vietnam. Vietnam, the new factory of the world. If you open a map, you will see immediately why Vietnam is the #1 choice. Location, location, and location. Vietnam shares a land border with China, specifically with Guangdong province, our the world's largest factory. What does this mean? It means a truck carrying components from Shenzhen can drive straight to Bac Ninh in just 12 hours. Morning, produce components in China. Afternoon, assemble in Vietnam. Evening, export to the US. No other country in the world has this golden geography. India doesn't have it. Mexico doesn't have it. Vietnam is the perfect backdoor for China, but geography is only a necessary condition. The sufficient condition is a genius diplomatic strategy the world calls bamboo diplomacy. Vietnamese bamboo, firm roots, but flexible branches bending with the wind. In 2023 and 2024, Vietnam did the unthinkable. They hosted US President Joe Biden and upgraded relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Just a few months later, they hosted Chinese President Xi Jinping and affirmed a community with a shared future. They are friends with both sides in a deeply divided world. For investors, this is a neutral paradise. If you are Apple, you can manufacture in Vietnam without fear of US sanctions and without offending China. Vietnam has become a safe zone, where goods can be legally origin washed. An iPad assembled in Vietnam, even if it contains 70% Chinese components, is still labeled Made in Vietnam and exported to the US with preferential tariffs. That is why Apple has moved its entire iPad and Apple Watch production lines here. That is why Samsung has turned Vietnam into its largest global phone production base, accounting for 50% of total output. Samsung is no longer just a Korean company, it is part of Vietnam's economic bloodstream. And look at the numbers. FDI into Vietnam in 2024 continues to break records. Jensen Huang's Nvidia visited and declared they wanted to make Vietnam their second home. Foxconn, Luxshare, Goertek, Apple's military contractors, TA, have all committed billions of dollars. They are building a complete electronic ecosystem in northern Vietnam, but Vietnam is not just pink. They are facing severe growing pains. In the summer of 2023, northern Vietnam suffered rolling blackouts. Foxconn factories had to turn off lights and reduce capacity because the grid was overloaded. That was a warning. Vietnam's energy infrastructure has not kept up with the speed of factory construction. Industrial land prices are skyrocketing. And most importantly, Vietnam is still only doing the assembly work. Value added is low. They import screws, screens, chips from China, assemble them, and box them. Vietnam is doing a great job as a factory, but to become a tech powerhouse, they need more. They need R&D. They need tech autonomy. However, as an investor, you cannot ignore Vietnam. In the short term of the next 5 to 10 years, this is where production money is flowing the strongest. It is like China in the year 2000, full of energy, hungry for wealth, and open to everyone. But if Vietnam is the new factory, then the next country I'm talking about has much bigger ambitions. They don't just want to be a factory, they want to be a new ecosystem of power. They are India. India, the new ecosystem of power. If Vietnam is the substitute for location, then India is the substitute for scale. India has something no other country, including the US, has: 1.4 billion people. In the next decade, India will be the largest and youngest supplier of labor on the planet. But India doesn't want to be a second Vietnam. They don't just want to be a cheap assembly hub. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has a much bigger ambition: Make in India. They want to own the technology. Look at how they played their cards with Apple. The Indian government told Tim Cook, "You want to sell iPhones to our 1.4 billion people? Fine. But you have to make them here. And they didn't just use a stick, they used a carrot. That is the PLI production linked incentive scheme. Simply put, the more you produce, the more money we reward you. This policy has created a veritable gold rush. Apple has committed to moving 25% of global iPhone production to India by 2025. But the most interesting thing isn't Apple. It's the rise of Indian domestic conglomerates. Look at the Tata Group. They just bought Wistron's factory to become the first Indian company to directly assemble iPhones. This is the core difference between India and Vietnam. Vietnam relies mainly on foreign companies, FDI. India is using foreign capital to nurture its own national champions. They want to create the Huaweis, the Samsungs of India, in the future. And don't forget the consumer market. When a company opens a factory in Vietnam, they are mainly exporting to the US. But when they open a factory in India, they are also selling to the Indian people themselves. The middle class in India is exploding. They are hungry for smartphones, electric vehicles, and laptops. That is the double-dipping benefit investors crave: cheap labor to produce, and a massive market to consume. Micron is building a $2.7 billion chip plant in Gujarat. AMD is investing $400 million in design centers. India is building an ecosystem, not just disjointed factories. They have the ambition to replace China in both hardware and software. However, every big opportunity comes with big risks. And this Alt-Asia picture is not as perfect as the articles paint it. Reality check. The pains of growth. As an investor, you need a cool head. Don't let FOMO blind you to the real risks. Let's talk about Vietnam first. Vietnam's biggest risk is bottlenecks. Energy infrastructure is overloaded. The blackouts of summer 2023 were a painful reminder. If there is no stable power, no chip factory can operate. Additionally, Vietnam is running out of industrial land in prime locations. Land rental prices in the north have increased 30–40% in just 1 year. The cheap price advantage is gradually being eroded. And another fatal risk: low value add. Vietnam currently still imports most input materials from China. If the US decides to tighten rules of origin, Vietnam could be collateral damage. What about India? India's risk lies in two words: bureaucracy and protectionism. India is famous for being a difficult place to do business. Import tariffs on components are sky high. Labor laws are complex. And the work culture is different. Yield rates at iPhone factories in India were initially much higher in defects than in China. Foxconn has struggled to find disciplined and skilled labor like in Shenzhen. India's logistics infrastructure is also a nightmare. Roads and ports are not synchronized, driving up transportation costs. So what is the conclusion? Will Vietnam and India replace China? The short answer is no. No one can completely replace China in the next 10 years. China is too big, too good, and too efficient. But Vietnam and India will fragment China. They will take the new growth. They will take the final assembly lines. And they will create a new manufacturing network. Networked manufacturing. R&D in the US. Components in China, Japan. Assembly in Vietnam, India. This is the new world order. Conclusion. The winner's map. We have gone around the world. From closed factories in Shenzhen to bustling construction sites in Bac Ninh and Bangalore. The picture is clear. The US-China tech war is not the end of globalization. It is the beginning of a new era. Re-globalization. In this era, the winner is not the strongest, but the most flexible. Vietnam wins thanks to diplomatic agility and location. India wins thanks to population scale and self-reliant ambition. Mexico wins thanks to being in America's backyard. They are the connector economies. They are the bridges between two separating worlds. And smart money is betting on them. So the question for you is, in your opinion, in this two-horse race, who will go further? Vietnam with its flexibility and speed, or India with its massive scale and internal strength? Will Vietnam become a new mini-China, or will India surpass everyone to become the next superpower? Where will you bet your money in the next 5 years? Share your views below. I read all the comments, and if you want to understand more deeply the impact of this war on your own wallet, about why your phone is about to double in price, about why the internet is about to be split, then you cannot miss my previous video. The Splinternet Reality: How the US-China Tech Divorce Bankrupts Your Future. That is the missing piece for you to have the full picture. Click on it right now. Don't just be a spectator, be a wise investor. I will see you there.